My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. The word brother occurs no less than 4 times in today's Gospel. 1, but I say this to you, anyone who is angry with his brother will answer for it before the court. 2, if a man calls his brother fool, he will answer it before the Sanhedrin. 3, if you're bringing your offering to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar. And 4thly, go and be reconciled with your brother first, and then come back and present your offering. So we see how Jesus is really stressing how important it is for us to love our brother. And of course, that means also sister. So the girls don't get off lightly. We have to love our brothers and sisters. And this is so important, it even takes precedence over our religious duties, from what Jesus says. Now, it's very important that we hear you saying this to us again so clearly, Jesus, because there are so many forces, not just on the outside world, but in my very soul, that tells me the exact opposite. I should be angry. I should call my brother a fool. And certainly, I should never, ever forgive them. And you and I, we hear that the whole time. Outside, kind of certain forces, propaganda and so on, telling us to hate certain people, consider them complete and utter fools, never forget what they've done against us, all these things. And then in my own soul, we have these same forces. I came across a story recently that made me think about this. And it's a story I'm sure you've heard of Jesse Owens, who is this great Olympic athlete who picked up a bunch of gold medals in the famous 1936 Olympics in Berlin. And it was a very famous Olympics because Adolf Hitler was trying to showcase the Olympics in his Germany to prove that the Aryan race were really superior to everybody else and certainly superior to the blacks and others. So it was a very kind of, potentially very racist event. That's why Hitler wanted it, because unfortunately that man was full of a lot of hate. But for him, Jesse Owens kind of put a hole in his plans, because Jesse Owens picked up those gold medals at the Olympics. 22-year-old, his own grandparents, Jesse Owens' grandparents, had been slaves themselves. Well, the story is that he picked up gold medals in the sprints, 100 meters and 200 meters. And he was also a champion world record holder, long distance jumper. But when it came to the long distance competition in Berlin, he kind of made a mess of it for one reason or another. He almost didn't qualify. So to qualify, he had to jump a certain distance, which would have been very easy for him. But he messed up on his 2 first jumps. And it looked like he wasn't going to get his 3rd jump. And then this German athlete came over, very typical, very Aryan-looking German long-distance jumper. Loose Long, came over and introduced himself to Jesse Owens, or said hello to him, and asked him what was the matter. Why was he making a mess of it? And then Loose Long gave him some really important advice to help him. A very simple thing, but a very important advice, so that he wouldn't mess up on his 3rd jump and be disqualified from the competition. And so Jesse Owens took the advice, took his 3rd jump, qualified no problem, and then he went on to win the gold medal in the long jump, with Loose Long coming and getting the 2nd medal, the silver medal. Adolf wasn't happy at all. In fact, he stormed out of the stadium. But it was the beginning of a great friendship between the 2 men. And Jesse Owens said later that you could melt down all my medals and cups, and they wouldn't even be the plating on the 24-carat friendship I felt for Luce Long at that moment when he received the that advice and so on. So Luce Long was very heroic, and I suppose in a sense he sacrificed the gold medal to Jesse Owens, because Jesse Owens would have got himself disqualified otherwise. Anyway, the two of them kept up contact, and in fact they did a victory run arm in arm around the stadium again, not very much to Adolf Hitler's liking at all. But so they forged a friendship at that moment, this Aryan German and this black fellow from the United States. And they kept up this friendship, and Luce Long sent him letters. Luce Long then was conscripted into the army and had to fight in North Africa. And there he was unfortunately killed in the war in North Africa. But in his very last letter to Jesse Owens, he wrote this, amongst other things. He said, "My heart tells me, if I be honest with you, that this is the last letter I shall ever write. If it is so, I ask you something. It is something so very important to me. It is, you go to Germany when this war is done, someday find my Karl," that was his son, "and tell him about his father. Tell him, Jesse, what times were like when we were not separated by war. I'm saying, tell him how things can be between men on this earth." And he signed off the letter, "Your brother Luce." It's very beautiful. Not even your friend, but your brother Luce. Tell him what things can be like between men on this earth. How men from very different backgrounds and very different races and everything can become great friends. And that is the way Jesus wanted to be. And not just friends, but that we are brothers. And this what Luce underlies by signing it off. Your brother Luce. We are brothers together. It's a very beautiful thing. So we have to listen to our Lord saying that. Perhaps almost more than anything else, Jesus wants that of us. To be brothers and sisters, real brothers and sisters of one another, resisting those at times very strong forces. Hitler was a very strong force who wanted the German people to hate a whole load of other people. Almost everybody else in the world, he wanted to hate them, out of this kind of excessive national pride, that they had to hate their neighbours, and they had to hate the Jews, and they had to hate the blacks, and so on. And Luce is a beautiful example of a guy who he refused. He refused to do that. So you and I, we have to try to do the same. Sometimes perhaps it's not necessarily very easy. But we have to listen to our Lord's words and telling us very clearly, anyone who's angry with this brother will answer for it. Can't even be angry. What our Lord is doing, talking about long jumps and high jumps, are Jesus is upping the bar. He's putting the bar higher for us. He's saying it's not just a question of don't kill people. That's a very low bar. There's a higher bar. I want you to jump much higher. Not just to not kill your brother or sister, but not even to be angry with them. Not even internally to say, what a fool this is. And internally again, forgive them. And again, before we bring our offering to the altar, Jesus says, go and be reconciled with your brother first, and then come back and present your offering. Let's ask Jesus for the grace, because again, maybe sometimes it's not easy, the grace to really love our brother, forgive, even when it gets very difficult. We're not forgiven in our turn. We know that perhaps somebody holds something against us and they're not going to let it go. Well, St. Joseph made a lovely phrase which comes in quite nicely here, that we have to drown evil with an abundance of good. So where there is no forgiveness, put in forgiveness. Where there is this disdain or hatred, well, put in respect, put in love, put in affection, and you will draw love and affection and forgiveness back out. I think it's easier also for us to feel like brothers and sisters of one another and behave really like brothers and sisters of one another if we remember that we share a mother. Our Lady is really my mother, your mother, the mother of that person that we may be finding particularly difficult to think kindly of, to forgive, to cool down our anger about. So let's finish by asking Our Lady, my mother, the mother of that brother or sister of mine, help me to live like a real brother, a real sister of one another. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.